A Victim Bites Back is meant to be mainly my travelogue as I go from London all the way down through France and Spain to Morocco and Marrakesh, then back through Spain and France and ending up in Italy. However, we've expanded it and came back to London in the middle. But I am now back in Italy, in the wonderful city of Venice, inside the fantastic Florians in St Mark's Square, where I'm enjoying an enormous ice cream before going back to my hotel and lying in the sunshine. Naughty me. As I mentioned in the last show, probably several times, because as I get older, I'm getting a bit muddled in old age. I love coming to Venice, parking my car on the Lido, staying in the fabulous Excelsior Hotel, and spending all day lying by the pool, getting a suntan, swimming for 5 hours each day, and then in the afternoon getting myself together and travelling on the launch that is every half hour down the canals out towards Venice, and spending the rest of the afternoon and the evening in Venice. I love it. And it gives me time to think. And one of the things I think about is the awful broken justice system in Great Britain. My dear friend Bob Woffenden, who was one of the best investigative journalists of all time, wrote a book recently which he published called The Nicholas Cases, in which he looked at the 10 worst miscarriages of justice in the last 30 years. And he published it. I was one of the 10, and so was a gentleman called Andrew Malkinson, who Bob saw very clearly had been quite innocent of a very serious rape and murder case that he'd been convicted of in, I think, 2003 or 2004, and was stuck in prison for years and years and years. Well, this year, finally, 2023, after 20 years of misery for Andrew Malkinson, his case was referred back to the Court of Appeal by the CCRC, and the CPS, the prosecutors, decided that if he was decided to be innocent, they would not prosecute him again because times had changed and DNA evidence proved he was not a guilty man. But the shocking thing is, he just spent 20 years having his life completely ruined, and Bob Moffat saw very clearly this was wrong when he wrote about it years ago, as he did about my case. It's the time that's wasted that's shocking. What on earth is that all about? I think perhaps my best ever lyric was for a song I wrote about the celestial millennium talent show that took place in heaven. And no sign of Simon Cowell, however, just God.
It was a hot July day in heaven, and the sky was blue below. All the citizens of paradise were attending the Celestial Millennium Talent Show. Last time they had witnessed a real surprise when the architect of Petra had won instead of the favourite, the Egyptian sculptor Tuthmose, for his bust of Nefertiti's head. Chaucer was there for the Canterbury Tales with the creator of Sydney's Opera House Sales. King Lear was a contender, as was Bleak House and the man who designed the computer Mad Mouse. Aristotle got there late, he had trouble parking and sat down between Lowry and Philip Larkin. Picasso spoke to Rubens, Sophocles with his mum, but Dr. Viagra sadly couldn't come. A hush fell and God announced the two finalists: The Death of the Virgin by Caravaggio and The Statue of David by MichelAngelo. There was the expected uproar and the odd supportive cheer. Jean Genet walked out pale, shaken and feeling a little queer. Rachmaninoff hissed to Beethoven, the judges must be deaf or dead, and Beethoven was heard to reply, "What was that you said?" Several felt they should have chosen Heroes Gateway Arch, and the stuffed church favoured the man who'd invented starch. The Scots championed TV and John Logie dared, whilst others whispered softly, "Thank God we were spared." The Orientals considered Hockeside's Great Wave very good, but Van Gogh felt a chair was the better use of wood. The Statue of David won, of course, by a mile, though Da Vinci felt he deserved it for that smile. When Caravaggio met Michelangelo at the Celestial Millennium Talent Show. When Caravaggio met Michelangelo at the Celestial Millennium Talent Show. When Caravaggio met Michelangelo at the Celestial Millennium Talent Show. When Caravaggio met Michelangelo at the Celestial Millennium Talent Show. When Caravaggio met Michelangelo at the Celestial Millennium Talent Show. When Caravaggio met Michelangelo at the Celestial Millennium Talent Show. When Caravaggio met Michelangelo at the
So it's goodbye to beautiful Venice, back to little car, onto the ferry, and off down the long road from Venice to Rome. Just a few days after I left Venice, there was a huge scandal because the Grand Canal had turned bright green. I made a joke that I desperately needed to have a pee, and that's what I caused it. But again, going on about miscarriages of justice, the audio book I've been listening to while I've been driving all the way along these long journeys was Harlan Coben's I Will Find You. I've mentioned it before and I'll mention it again because it's a great book, very well read, and thoroughly entertaining when you're driving for 5, 6, 7 hours at a time. I thoroughly enjoyed it and really thought it was a fantastic way to spend time when you're travelling on your journey. Anyway, got to Rome safe and sound. I do love the cities in Italy, rather like Morocco, where every city is completely different. It's a bit the same in Italy, where you get somewhere like Venice, which is totally different from Rome, which in turn is totally different from Florence, or Bologna, or Genoa, or Naples, or Sicily. Everywhere is completely unlike anywhere else. One of the reasons I adore Italy and the Italians. I didn't mention that there are two of the best 20 films ever made, in my opinion, that feature Venice as a venue. One is Death in Venice, starring the fantastic Dirk Bogarde, and of course the incredibly beautiful Tadzio, who is perhaps the only boy who is very nearly as beautiful in humanity in the history of the world as the Bean, who hits his middle 60s next month, so congratulations and happy birthday, Bean. But also Don't Look Now, which is set in Venice out of season and is perhaps the most atmospheric film ever made. You really ought to watch both. Anyway, off I go in the car towards Rome. I have still the rest of the brilliant Harbin Coben I Will Find You book. By the way, can you see that, or is it all mirrored? I can never quite work out how this new technology works, but it is actually a fantastic book. So I finished listening to that. You can read it. Funnily enough, in a swimming pool in Venice, lying on one of the sunbeds, was a lady who was reading I Will Find You by Harlan Coben, and I said, "You will love that. It really is great." She said, "Yes, I'm enjoying it enormously. My husband recommended it and I'm absolutely loving it." Anyway, I can recommend it. So it's like a 5 or 6 hour drive all the way down the spine of Italy from Venice through Bologna or past Bologna, that didn't look particularly flooded to me, through Florence or past Florence and into Rome. I tend to stay just on the edges, the outskirts of Rome. It's one of the big advantages of having a car, because you can stay not in the centre. It's literally 10 minutes drive into the Vatican and St. Peter's. So it really is incredibly close. And yet it's surrounded by trees and beautiful greenery and shrubbery, and is a lovely place to be because I look out of my window in the morning and I breathe in this incredible fresh air that the trees seem to filter. So I really do prefer staying a little bit out. Also, the hotels are slightly cheaper there, although I have to say this hotel, like all the hotels this year, has increased its prices by 3 times. So whereas last year I stayed 6 weeks in this hotel, this year I can only afford to stay for 2 weeks. I spend most of my days, as I have done for 60 years every summer, at the Cavaliere Hilton, which has the best view in the world. You can see all the 7 hills of Rome surrounding it from your balcony, but especially down below you can see the Vatican, St. Peter's and everything else. And I just swim all day long, do about 5 hours a day, backwards and forwards, and I adore the place, I've got to admit. It's very relaxing, but it's also very good exercise. Again, the prices of this place have gone up like mad. I used to stay there many years ago when I had lots of money, and it was expensive then, with a large suite costing about 200 quid. I stopped staying here when the prices went up to about 400 quid and found another hotel that I went to instead. That was cheaper, but I still used to come here all day and use the pool and the spa, which I enjoyed a great deal. And then the prices went up again, and last year they were about 400 or 500 quid a night. This year they're about £1,000 a night. Can you believe that? Everywhere I go, I have my towel that I bought in Tunisia about 30 years ago of Tutankhamun. I love my towel. It marks my spot. And here I am in my swimming trunks, looking at the world, enjoying myself. My dear friend Nino, who used to be the night manager at another hotel, who I've known for years, I brought here to a restaurant. Nino died recently, sadly, in a fire in his home. I'll tell you more about that in a subsequent show. But he adored it. One of the waiters in the restaurant yesterday absolutely adored my shirt because he has a parrot that's identical to the parrot on the front of my shirt. So he insisted on having a photograph taken. And I had another one done by the pool, looking, I have to say, colourful, and I like to think rather attractive.
A beautiful lady, classy and solo. She spoke no Inglese, and I know Romano. I begged my dear amico, who lived in San Basilio, teach me amore in Italiano, Nino. Figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, vaffanculo. Io vecchio inglese froccio, figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, porca Madonna bambina. I booked a tavolo per due at the Sanssouci Ristorante. The orchestra played sweetly as we sipped our Chianti. I held her hand, stroked her thighs, looked into her eyes, whispered these words of love, watched her delighted surprise. Figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, vaffanculo, io vecchio inglese froccio, figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, porca Madonna bambina. Figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, vaffanculo, io vecchio inglese froccio, figlio di mignota, mortacci tua, porca Madonna bambina.
Ow! Phillip Schofield. The media seems all about him over this bank holiday weekend. Who, you may well ask if you live in America or Australia or Asia or South Africa or Morocco or Europe, who on earth is Phillip Schofield? I did actually bump into his parents years ago when I was walking along the beach in Hawaii, that I'd actually encountered these two people. They were very charming. They ended up by saying they recognised me because I was very famous then, and they introduced themselves as Phillip Schofield's parents. Very nice couple they were too. I feel sorry for Phillip. I can't really take him seriously because he started his life with Gordon the gopher in a broom cupboard, and I've never been able to take him seriously since. But the poor guy is now absolutely the latest victim of the false allegations industry. Yes, I don't know whether the allegations are true or false, but I know what's going to happen. He's going to be crucified. People are going to be encouraged by the enablers, bent lawyers, journalists and so on, to come forward and claim they too were assaulted or abused or raped or whatever. when they were 12 or 22 or whatever. He'll probably end up going to prison for a very long time for crimes which I suspect will never have taken place. That's the way of the world these days, and I find it actually rather horrifying and nasty. I really don't know the guy. I met him a few times briefly, bumped into him in Waitrose a few months ago, and he said, "Oh, hello, Paul, how are you?" He thought I was Paul Gambaccini. I said, "Well, you've known me for years." Oh, I'm sorry, Jonathan. Oh, God. Celebrities, where would we be without them? See you for the next episode, again here in Rome, of A Victim Bites Back, and doesn't he? Ah!